Welcome, everybody, to the first live stream of the channel. And I'm still getting my bearings, so as I am new to this, we will figure this whole thing out together. But what I have before me today is a Hobbit hole that I'm going to be working on. And I am going to be doing the painting phase today, and this is just a little snippet of what I'm going to be covering in the TW Wood workshop. So what I'm going to do is try and figure out how to adjust the camera here. No, there we go. It looks like that's as far out as I can go, so I'm just going to have to make the best of it here. But in any event, you can see that I'm looking at myself in the dashboard and ready to begin. So before me, what I have are my pre-made colors for this Hobbit hole. So this is going to be an autumn themed Hobbit hole. And so the colors I have are red, yellow, orange. I have a bit of I have a bit of ivory black mixed with yellow ochre, a bit of black and red mixed together. Then I have a bit of this color mixed again with blue, and then mixed again with more blue. And then I have that same color, actually it's yellow and blue, and mixed again with more yellow to make that green. So and then of course I have purple as well. So these are the colors that I have to work with. And so first things first, whenever you're doing an image like this, you want to get maximum coverage, right? So I'm going to take my large flat brush. Off panel, what I'm doing is dipping it into my water. And then I'm going to prime the surface of my paper. And what I'm going to do is I'm actually just going to do this in stages. And this is something you do if you work large format. You're only going to prime the area that you would immediately begin to work. So I want to start from light to dark since I'm working in watercolor. And what I'm going to do is come in and start with that light yellow after I've primed all of the areas that I'm going to paint. Give me one moment, actually. I'm just going to adjust the cord for the camera here. So that way we're not jostling anything unnecessarily. So I'm going to take a bit of this color now. I'm going to test it and also get a little bit of the excess off of my practice strip there. And then I'm going to start by just coming in here. And I can even dip my flat in a bit more of that solution. And I'm going to come in and really triple down on the yellow. Now, some of my lead is going to get picked up in this, and that's okay. And my clunky left hand keeps jostling the camera, so I'll try and keep that camera steady. And because yellow's an illuminant, I'm basically getting as much of this as possible covered in like a bright yellow. So I'm going to switch to my small round here that I have, or rather my medium round. And I'm also going to grab a bit more of that yellow, because I really want this to be nice and saturated. And what I'm doing is I'm putting it on my test strip first, and I'm getting the excess off of that paper. And then I'm coming in and I can blot around certain areas. And I can even come in after the fact with gouache at the end to pop out some blues for the sky. But because this is autumn themed, what I want to do is I really want to focus on getting those autumn colors in there from the beginning, from the get-go, really. And this is a yellow door, but I think I might make it a green door. Let that dry for a moment. And then let's take a moment to sort of take stock of where we are, right? So as these areas are drying, I can stipple in and then cross contour, massage those edges. And a edited version of this will be available through TW Wood, which is the local studio that I'm doing this Hobbit hole painting workshop with this weekend, 11 to 4 in Montpelier, Vermont. So if you're in the Montpelier area and you are curious about this sort of thing, feel free to check them out. I'm going to be sending this video to them today shortly. And then the other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to come in as this is drying and just thin out some of these areas. Right? Because what we want is we want dappled light. So dappled light is going to require us to kind of go a little bit thinner, a little less heavy-handed with the paint. One thing I can do is I can come in and I can use a bit of, can grab a bit of white. Still coming in with my large flat. I want to make sure I didn't pick up any yellow. And of course, while the watercolor is malleable like this, I can come in and spread that pigment around. And I'll try to monitor the chat if anybody has any questions. And again, this is my first live stream, so I'm very much finding my sea legs with this thing. I want to look into the aspect ratio on the camera there. I'm not really concerned with rushing anything like that. Just laying in my colors, going from light to dark. gradually sort of building everything up. So I like that. We've got quite a bit of yellow, quite a bit of orange. I'm going to come in now from this bottom corner with a small round. I'm going to clean it real good because it's got a bit of purple on there. Which is another color we're going to want. And I'm just going to come in with a light green. And experimenting. I'm actually going to mix down this light green so that it's a little less bright, contrast with the yellow. And I did an autumn hobbit hole like this last year. It sold at a Christmas market, and it was very similar to the one I'm doing now. And I know my wife's been bugging me to do a autumn hobbit hole for her. And every time I do one, they sell. It's usually in the holidays though that these types of images sell. I don't know about this latest one I'm doing. And I'm really taking my time with this because as I'm doing it live, normally what I would do is I would give this more time to dry in between passes. But because I don't have that, what I'm doing is very much sort of a wet on wet. So I'll pivot over a little bit. You can see I'm kind of attacking this area. I'll try and just judge the camera over. I have a very small tripod, and generally the tripod I'm very happy with. But as I do more of these live streams, I'll figure out what's what. And at the end, what I would do is come in with some gouache. So I'm going a little bit heavier with the pigment now. And I get the excess off. I can judge this around. I can start to work some of this green onto the tree. Some red. Let's get some red in this tree. And by red, I mean red blended down with yellow ochre. Leave some of these areas lighter. You can see right there that bark, it's already starting to kind of pop a little bit in the center there. Oh, thanks, Jojo Siwa's World. Awesome, man. That means a lot. Thanks. Like I said, this is like my first go doing one of these live streams, and I'm doing this specifically to try to promote a local workshop. But I rather enjoy sharing what I do with people, and the more the more comfortable I get, so to speak, working in this manner, the more of these I will do. I'm very much a novice when it comes to live streaming. I do a lot of online corporate events, sort of like paint and sips, that type of thing, of that nature. But I've always wanted to do something that has a little bit more of a rigor to it, a little bit more steeped in like academic painting and drawing, because I do teach that as well locally. And, I've got a bunch of ideas. I come out of a comics background originally. And this is going to be a slow burn, so feel free if you guys can dip in and out. I'll be here for a bit. I'm not going anywhere. So I'm kind of just thinking I want to reassess. I like what's going on over here, but this is still quite wet. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a little bit of white from one of the, from my pan here. And it's mixed down with some yellow, so I might have to break out a tube. Yeah, it's quite yellow. See what happens when I mix a little gray in there. Nah, no dice. So my white's been pretty contaminated, but let me show you an interesting kind of muddy color I got. So this is sort of almost like a Zorn palette green that I didn't intend to get, but I can still use this. And I want to look around where this is drying most. And what I see is it's kind of drying up here a bit. Right. And also here. I like that name too, Jojo Siwa's. What I really think this needs is it needs some more sort of contrast. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually just going to get some green straight out of the tube, bring that into the mix. And I'm going to start to work some of the area over here. And right now, again, this is still very much wet, so I'm trying not to mess with this too much. I do a lot of oil painting as well, and one of the subjects I really want to tackle in oil is the Silmarillion. I know the camera's a little janky there, but that's kind of where I'm attacking the image. And I have an idea for a Turin, sort of a Turin painting done after Frank Frazetta, that iconic Conan the Barbarian painting where he's holding a sword on like a mound of skulls. And I felt like, well, isn't that like sort of evocative of the character of Turin? I thought, man, there's such a broad canvas when it comes to Middle Earth. You can do whimsical hobbit holes, or you can do, crazy dark sword and sorcery. And again, I'm just trying to pop certain areas. I am using a reference off to the side here, so I'm trying to be very aware of that. I'm actually going to break out a tube of white. Let me grab some acrylic gouache here, which I have. Ooh, is it behind me? Let's see. Ah, here we go. I don't have the acrylic gouache on hand, but I do have these. These are Master's Touch, which I use. So I like Master's Touch a lot. A lot of the artists that I really spark to, like I know Dave Dorman uses Master's Touch. And I'm just going to throw some white gouache on my palette over here. Grab a little bit of that brown and make like a sort of like a tan tree bark color. I'll try and hold that up. Actually, it's not gouache technically, but white does go more opaque, so I have like sort of this muddy color I'm making. Let me punch up the chat again real quick. Yes. There's everybody. And just sort of, oh yeah, look at that. Kind of just, as this is drying, I'm getting a little more control out of the areas I want. I don't want to cover up all of my initial areas where I got some nice blotting, though. I want to leave some of those areas exposed. I'm not really stressing whether or not this is going to come out good or not. I'm just sort of having fun with it. I know I've got like some tree bark over here. And then I've got the actual Hobbit hole itself. And this, at this point, at this juncture, I can start to maybe bring in some blacks, make like a proper gray, which I'm doing off panel right now. Come in where I know I'm gonna have a lot of gray. Lay in my shadows, or lay in my midtones rather. I know I'm going a little bit against type with watercolor. They really, the way you're supposed to learn it, they want you to work light to dark. And, you know, I do like to work light to dark, but because I sort of ping pong back and forth between watercolor and gouache, I tend to break that rule. I don't know if any of you guys are fans of David Finch's channel. My friend was just on that show. What was it, Drawing Monday Night with Dave or something? And he's doing a Kickstarter on there. It's a science fiction book. And so I'm very happy for him. He got fully funded. The Kickstarter was $40,000. And he ended up meeting his goal. A close friend of mine. And was very happy. He was over the moon when he found out he was getting on David's channel. We were both over the moon. I'm both big fans of David Finch. And then the thing you want to be cognizant of, like I'm going to actually massage this color out a little bit because it can get real muddy real quick when you're working quickly with watercolor and you're not giving the color proper time to dry. So I'm just going to go over and sort of cover a bunch of these sketch lines just to kind of get, you know, balance out, you know, even out, average out some of these colors. I don't mind if it gets muddy here in the shadow because that's going to get blacked out based on the reference I'm using. And then I'm going to go in after the fact. I'm going to tighten up a lot of the flowers, but you know, in this beginning stage, I just kind of want to really conform to my pencil lines, leaving the door to last because the door is going to be a proper green. I'm going in and I'm going to like still massage out this color. I'm going to wet my brush and use my round to massage my edges. And I would do the same thing in oil if I were working in oil. It would actually be way easier to do this in oil. But the only problem with oil and live streaming is just the sort of logistics don't really line up. But yeah, no, I love that name, Jojo Siwa's World. I didn't even know who Jojo Siwa was until my little sister, who's like 18 years my junior. She's like one of these little Zoomers, and she was telling me about Jojo Siwa, and I was like, oh God, I'm old. All right. So as tempted as I am to go in here right away, I'm not going to. I'm going to look around where this is drying, right? I've got to sort of like make some executive decisions here, have executive function as opposed to executive dysfunction. I'm actually going to mix some dark green out of one of my cheapo tubes. This is the brands I'm using, by the way, I'm using a Gumbacher travel kit. I'm using a tiny Windsor travel kit. I'm using Master's Touch brushes and Master's Touch watercolor tubes. And I do really like Master's Touch. Let me come over there. I know that I'm sort of, as I give everybody a headache. And maybe I'll do a comic book live stream one of these days too. You know, like I said, originally I come out of sci-fi comics. And for years, I tried to get into Marvel and DC for years. And never got a shot with Marvel and DC. Worked for some smaller companies. Had a few pitches greenlit by some Diamond distributed companies, but never got into Marvel and DC. My friend did, the guy who is doing Battle Chronicle Soul Striker on Kickstarter, which just got funded. He worked for DC for I think 6 years, and kind of crazy. These edges I can always soften up later. I'm just kind of going in and, you know, playing around with shapes and triangles. And this is something I do quite a bit. And then boom, look at that. You just pop, you start to pop stuff. I can even pop stuff down here. I can start to layer in. As things become drier and I get more control, I try to avoid using a detail brush until the very end. I debated the wisdom of doing this live stream during the middle of the day, but I'm trying to get the word out about this workshop I'm doing in person, and I figured there's got to be some people watching in the middle of the day. And this will be available if you are watching this on your lunch break or whatever. The full, well, it won't be full. It'll be an edited, sort of condensed version of this will be available. I'll try to make it available through the gallery website. But this is good fun, right? And, you know, I'm just taking my time. I'm not trying to create the Mona Lisa. I am trying to create a compelling image, but I'm also trying to have fun with it. I'm not on a crazy deadline with this. I can always come in with gouache after the fact, but I want to try to hit some of my shadows. And I'm abstracting a lot of these plants. Get some grass going by indicating them as symbols. And because it's autumn, I want to be aware of how much green I'm throwing in there, especially like cartoony green. You want to mix your green down with red for shadows generally so that it doesn't look too cartoony, at least something I picked up from looking at James Gurney. And James Gurney is like the master at that. Smuggling reds, he calls it. And you can see I've finally broken out my small brush here. I'm still using this green that has a bit of blue in it, cool green. And you know what? I'm going to probably pop that out with some gray again at some point. I'm going to give myself some green and maybe even some red in here. Again, you can throw in a little bit of alizarin if you want, a little bit of cadmium red when you're mixing in red with your green. Like even here. Slowly building it up. It's looking pretty good so far. I'm letting the green around the leaves dry, and I'm going to take a moment to look at my reference. Just punching up the chat again. throw some red down in some areas here. And then I'm going to start to do, I'm going to invent some orange in some of these. Trees here. Straight out of the tube. Boom. And at the end, what I would do is let this dry overnight and then throw in some God rays with using a glazing, glazing technique. You want to wait 24 hours generally in between passes when you do this sort of thing. And I kind of like that. And you can see I'm just kind of going through. At this point, what I want to do is maybe pull out the focus. Soften some of these edges. And then I'm coming in and I'm looking at where I need to put some dark green. Keeping it very sort of loose. Kind of having fun with the colors. I'm going to add a bit of blue in here to the facade. can even add a bit of blue in here too. Blue and maybe white. Too much white, so you get what I do is if I get too much of a color on my brush, I throw a bit of the excess off by twisting it on my paper towel. And I like all that yellow I have on the wood. So what I want to do is try and retain some of that luminosity. And then for the dark areas, I'll do some black and blue. Linking my shadows. And I'm just trying to pay attention to my edges here. I don't mind that. I'm probably going to end up going over that in some white gouache. I use gouache quite a bit when I'm trying to solve problems. I don't mind that. Let me click out, click back in. Nice. Grab a little bit of yellow. And let's keep noodling away, shall we? And again, linking shadows, right? I want to link shadows, so coming in, grabbing a bit of, doing ultramarine and black for these shadows to contrast with all these autumn colors that are currently drying. And I'm just going to keep it very abstract. Yeah, it's coming along now. Now that's tightening up. Nice, it's coming along. Let's throw some darks in here now. Maybe along this tree. And then just going across. More darks. And I know I've been dancing around the door. That's because I'm trying to get all this other action sorted. And so for that, and to that end, what I'm going to need to do is grab a bit more of this dark green, continue to kind of detail the tree. And again, this isn't like an exact science, especially like if I weren't streaming this, I would most likely take my time, get up, let it dry for a few hours, come back. Ideally, even with small format stuff, if I'm doing it in my own studio, I like to like really take my time. I'm not a fast painter. I like to kind of let it dry 24 hours and then come back to it. I just find I get such a good result when I do that. But with this sort of particular thing, what I'm doing is I'm keeping it a little more on the impressionistic side, and I'm trying to dance around to dry areas. Like here, I could kind of model this as it's drying a little bit. Like, let me switch it up. Just model this edge a little bit as it's drying, right? Model this in here. You want to use that round to massage your edges. And who knows, maybe what I'll do is I'll I'll do a phase 1 today and a phase 2. But the whole process, sort of edited and compiled, will be available through TW Wood, their website. Even here, I could massage this out a little bit if I go in and I do some like light green. That's quite a bit of green. Let's throw in a bit of purple, shall we? It's coming along. What it needs is a little bit of blue, I think. At some point, maybe gouache will happen sooner rather than later. Because it's, you know, the biggest thing when you're working this quickly with all these autumn colors is you don't want it to become too muddy. A little bit of mud you actually want, I think. Like even here, breaking up some of this with some like muddy, ruddy colors. Let's see. Get that water off. All right. I'm going to let that green dry for a minute, and then I'm going to do the green door here. I'm grabbing a very bright green, and I'm mixing it with a bit of yellow. Maybe blue would have been a better choice, but I'm going to go with green. I'm committed now. I kind of overshot outside of my lines there, but it's okay. Rules are meant to be broken. Mixing a bit more gray here. You can see that, you know, having some of that yellow come through is a good decision. I think what I'm going to do now, before I get too far into this, is bring a little bit of that into the texture of this part of the door frame here. Even if it goes a little green, it's not the end of the world. In fact, I kind of want it to be a little more muted on the, on the gray. it's looking a little bit more like it's part of the same building now. All right. Excellent, excellent. I'm going to try to pull some of the shadow down or mute it. Need a little bit more dark. I'm just massaging edges. Let's get a little bit more red in this tree. And then I think what I'll do is I'm going to cut this, but I'll finish up the door here. And this is basically, a snippet of what I'm going to be going over in my workshop. If I know my light's coming from this way, that means I'm going to have a little bit of a shadow over here. It doesn't really, with light sources, you don't want to overthink it too much. And then you can see that I'm not done yet, but it's getting there. It's going to take a few more sessions here. But I've gotten quite a bit done in that initial hour. So thanks, everybody, for tuning in. I will be doing more of these. And until next time, have a wonderful week, right? Okay. Take care, everybody. Let me figure out how to turn this thing off. And then pause it, and then I'll turn it off. But yeah, thanks, everybody.